As the Russian Revolution became successful, communism became popular. Communists appeared in Japan also. The capitalists of Japan were afraid of communism. They knew the communists would organize strikes and all that. Japanese industry would be paralyzed by the strikes. Therefore, the Japanese wanted a strong government and no communism. The army also was keen on strong government and did not want communism. The Japanese were very angry at the Washington Conference, which said that shipping of Japan should be restricted. Britain, USA would have 5 ships each and Japan only 2. On that ratio, 5-5-2. Japan did not like these restrictions. Also, in Japan, population was increasing. It was now 60 million. And the Japanese wanted territory to settle the extra population. Japan wanted territory to secure more raw materials. All this led to Japanese militarism and the Second World War. During the 19th century beginning, 20th century beginning, when Britain was afraid of Russia, Britain entered into a treaty with Japan, establishing an alliance against Russia. But after Russia was defeated and there was no longer any threat from Russia, the British said that their old treaty was at an end. They didn't want any support from Japan. Now to check Japan and Russia, they established a base at Singapore. Looked like British were ganging up against Japan. Just as in Germany, fascism was becoming popular, in Japan also fascism became popular. The object of fascism was to make the country strong under military dictatorship. A fascist and extreme militant, Kita wrote a highly popular book like Hitler's Mein Kampf, advocating the ending of Zaibatsu and the corrupt politicians. He wanted a social and economic revolution led by the army. He wanted Japan to conquer all those areas of Manchuria. His book provided a fascist blueprint for Japan. Indeed, Japan had made massive investments in Manchuria. It did not want to lose those investments. It declared that it wanted to establish a firm rule in Manchuria. In the meanwhile, China was getting united under Chiang Kai-shek, the president of Kuomintang. The Kuomintang threatened Japan. He said he would drive out all foreign economic agencies. He started building railways in Manchuria, threatened Japanese railways. Russians were also trying to advance in Manchuria. Just understand how events were moving inexorably towards the Second World War. I am explaining Japanese militarism. In order to understand this slide, you must remember that Japanese population was increasing. It was nearly 60 million. Therefore, they wanted more and more territory in China to settle their people. The Chinese were also moving into Manchuria. As against 250,000 Japanese, there were 30 million Chinese. And the Chinese hated the Japanese. They insulted the Japanese. So the Japanese wanted to fight it out. Now took place what's called the Bukden incident. A small section of the Japanese railway was blown up. Probably Japan itself did it to provoke the Chinese, but accused the Chinese of blowing it up. War now began. Yeah. The Japanese used the Mukden incident as a pretext. They occupied the whole of Manchuria, naming it as Manchukuo. The League of Nations did nothing, merely condemned Japan. The government of Japan was afraid of its army because the army was very powerful. The army didn't care for the League of Nations. And the Western countries did nothing to check Japan. The Japanese felt emboldened because they saw that the Chinese could do nothing. The Chinese resorted to a boycott of Japanese goods. The Japanese became angry and occupied Shanghai. The League of Nations could do nothing. It merely condemned Japan, and Japan withdrew from the League of Nations. So the Japanese realized that they could do anything they liked. Young army officers tried to assassinate their ministers and political leaders. They saw that a conflict was brewing between the East and the West, that the Japanese were best fitted to lead the conflict, that the Japanese could ultimately rule the world. In Germany, the Nazis were raising their head. They were demanding Lebensraum, living room for Germany. Similarly, the Japanese demanded a place in the sun. The Japanese wanted a place for a free play of Japanese capital, skill and labor. They declared they were at war with the white race. They declared that they wanted to liberate China from the communists. They declared that they wanted to liberate Asia from the white race. In the meanwhile, army officers were assassinating political leaders. They seized power. Increasing militarization led to the Second World War. Now began a system of alliance diplomacy. Russia and China saw the danger from Japan. So they came together. Japan retaliated by concluding an alliance, the Anti-Comintern Pact with Germany. There was a minor clash at Lakao in China. The Japanese launched a full-scale invasion. The Chinese had been suffering invasion after invasion for the past 100 years. They had formed a guerrilla army under Kuomintang and later under Mao Zedong. The guerrillas resisted the Japanese fiercely. China is a vast territory and the Japanese could not move every way. The Chinese guerrillas won a great victory at Tai Town. Yeah, they established their own wartime capital at Chungking. Their resistance was ferocious. The Japanese sang another tune. They said they were not interested in conquering China. Why are people misunderstanding us? We want to liberate China from the communists. All bluff. They went on militarizing Japanese polity. The army seized power. The Parliament of Japan and the cabinet became mere rubber stamps, tools in the execution of the army will. This is the last slide on Japanese militarism. Winston Churchill realized the danger. He closed the Burma Road, prevent safeguarding Burma from the Japanese. But the Japanese rolled in, occupied Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Burma. They even moved up to the northeastern part of India. They had an alliance with the Indian National Army. But when the Burma Road was closed, China suffered because supplies could not reach China. In Europe, Germany was victorious. It occupied France and established a puppet government called the Vichy government. And the Vichy government gave a free hand to Japan to do whatever she liked in Asia. The Japanese now invented a slogan, Asia co-prosperity sphere. They said, we will drive the white man out. The British retaliated with their own slogan. Yeah. They said, blow the Jap out of the map and fill the gap with Union Jack. I used to read all this. Yeah. Now, America was still apathetic. Japanese told the Americans, let's settle all our questions, let's settle all our problems, let's sit and talk. But the Americans knew the intentions of the Japanese. They refused talks. And the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. America entered the war, to the fierce war, heavy bombing. Finally, the Japanese could be silenced only when atom bombs were dropped over Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The Americans occupied Japan. That ended the Second World War.